Hello, and thank you for joining us on this webinar. My name is Daniel Bianchini, and I'm pleased to be joined by Matthew Taylor, co-founder of Common Ground. Today's webinar explores what and how you should be tracking to accurately measure and optimize your website marketing campaign for better results. If you've got any questions as we go through the presentation, then feel free to type them into the Q&A section. Should be visible at the bottom of your screen, and we will come back to them at the end of the session. If you've just missed the announcement at the start, just a reminder, the webinar is being recorded, so we will be sending out the recording at the end of the week, so you can see a copy of the slide deck and you can rewatch for more of the information that Matthew has. Before we get started, I wanted to start by just running a really quick poll on understanding, are you happy with the data that you have is accurate? So we can quickly run that. It would just take a few seconds. Matt, how do you think this will go down? Just really quick.
I'd be surprised if the majority aren't saying no, to be honest, because things like cookie policies, the tracking between different platforms, I think a lot of people are worried about the accuracy of their data.
Yeah, it's pretty spot on. So I'm just going to close the poll now, and 47% said that the accuracy of their data they were not sure about. So spot on from that point of view. What we're going to do then is, Matt, I know you've got so much to go through. I'm going to hand it over to you, and yeah, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan. Good morning, everybody. If you wonder why I keep looking over there, that's where my presentation is on my screen. So I've made a tactical error already. So hopefully that's not too distracting for anybody. Obviously, as Dan said, I'm here to kind of discuss how you can use web analytics to increase your marketing effectiveness. It's one of the key tools that marketers have in order to boost the returns that they get. And it's one of those areas where a lot of people aren't using it and a lot of people aren't maximizing it. And so hopefully you'll all pick up something from it. What I'm going to cover, really quick introduction to me. I'm not going to go through that in any great detail. Then we're going to move on to the importance of tracking and the benefits of tracking, what you should be tracking, how you should be tracking, common mistakes, and then some time for question and answers at the end. As Dan said, if you've got questions, feel free to drop them in. Dan might interrupt every now and again if it's particularly relevant to what I'm discussing at that point, but we'll probably just cover them at the end. So really quickly first, who am I and why you should listen? So as Dan mentioned, I'm his co-founder at Common Ground. Essentially why you should kind of take on board what I'm saying, I guess, and to reassure you that I do know what I'm talking about. I've been doing this for over 15 years now. I was counting up the other day, approximately, if not more than 658 clients that I've worked with over that 15-year period, and we're really good at hitting results. So last 12 months is probably 90% plus of our clients hit their results. And essentially what I'm here to do for you is what we do for most of our clients, which is hopefully make the complex simple. So analytics can be really complex if you let it be complex, but realistically you need to keep it as simple as you possibly can. And here's the kind of the only bragging slide I have in here. This is the kind of the clients that we've worked with, again, just to reassure you that I really do know what I'm talking about. First thing first, realistically, tracking is a massive area. I won't be able to cover everything on this webinar today. This is kind of, I guess, the kind of theoretical top level. There's a whole other webinar that we could do with the actual practicalities and showing you exactly how to implement stuff. Hopefully this will give you, this will arm you with the information you need to kind of go out and create the analytics and the kind of the data that you need. I'll be honest, the way I learn all of my analytics is there's a huge volume of self-help stuff online. YouTube is amazing for this kind of stuff. There's step-by-step, so I'd encourage people, if you're looking at that going, that's a really great idea, but I don't know how to do that, feel free to ask us because we will point you in the right direction, but YouTube is your friend on this one. First, I'm going to cover, I've said first a lot of times already, but this is the first kind of the sensible bits. So the benefits of analytics tracking. There are a lot. I've just kind of gone with 10 just to kind of give you a flavor. First one is understanding your audience. A lot of the people on this call I know kind of in the B2B lead gen space. A lot of you will be working on things like personas and trying to kind of match that into your website with your content and that kind of stuff. And analytics is actually a really great way to validate your audience personas. And it also allows you to make better selections when it comes to your marketing channels to match those personas as well. The second one is you can understand your traffic sources a lot better. So obviously a lot of people will sometimes they just look at the kind of the top level. What's my traffic? How many people are coming to my site? How many people are viewing my ads, whatever that may be. But actually analytics, the benefit of it is it allows you to kind of compare different channels. This allows you to plan more effectively and allocate your resources as well. It's a really common one that we have with clients where just by showing them actually where they get their best returns from, which channels are the most effective ones, which channels are there for kind of support, it can actually generate a lot more revenue or a lot more sales, conversions, whatever your measure might be, just by actually allocating your resources better into the channels that work better. This seems really obvious. I will admit it seems really obvious, but it's something that we see multiple times a year with clients. And it doesn't only allow you to see which channels drive traffic, it's the quality of that traffic as well. So you can identify top converters and which kind of channels support your ultimate conversion earlier in the funnel as well. The third one is you can measure user engagement. This lets you, apart from obviously seeing how effective your site is, you can also use it to understand how effective your messaging is, your targeting, your UX, even before you get to the conversion stage. So this is kind of metrics like page views, time on site, time on page, scroll depth, bounce rate, engagement times, those kind of things can really help you refine your messaging. You can see kind of if you land somebody on a page with what you think is a really effective message, and a lot of those people are bouncing straight off, they're not engaging with the content, they're not scrolling, you've got a really key indicator that that message actually isn't resonating with your audience. The next one, obviously the best one in my point of view, is you can do conversion tracking. So especially if your site isn't e-commerce, this is again one of the areas that a lot of kind of more or less mature kind of analytics implementations will see. They won't have conversion tracking set up, or it's not accurate, or it only focuses on macro conversions. We like to look at micro and macro conversions. So micro conversions might be a download, it might be a sign up for something, whereas a macro conversion is your full kind of somebody's getting in touch, purchasing, that kind of thing. So by understanding those, you can kind of identify weaknesses in your funnel, your UX, or your messaging. And another one is a really useful one is you're able to analyze your return on investment or your return on ad spend. The difference, if you don't know between those two, is return on investment includes all of the costs, including kind of if you're paying an agency, the agency fees, creating ads if it's kind of an ad channel, whereas ROAS is literally kind of strip those out and it's like, here's my marketing spend, what return am I getting from that? So again, it makes, if you understand those things, you can evaluate the effectiveness of different channels, and that guides your future budget allocation. Again, it's one of the things that's linked to the next one, which is identifying patterns and trends. If you can better understand your patterns and trends within your business, and you understand the return on investment or the ROAS, what you can do is you can actually drive, we've done it for people where we see 5 to 10% more conversions from exactly the same ad spend budget, just by allocating that budget differently based on trends within the ROAS and the return on investment. Like analytics is one of the primary ways to identify trends and patterns. This could be seasonality, it could be when people are buying within your market, which is always very specific to markets, and use that data to allocate your budgets and allow. And you can also do other things, like you can actually use it to optimize your supply chains. You can tailor your products or services at different types of the year. So, for example, if you're, let's say we've got a client in car subscription, we can tell them this is the kind of the volume of traffic or the impressions that these different cars are getting at different times of year, or here's the colors that are getting more impressions or more sessions or more conversions. So they can start to tailor what they're ordering. As a result of that, they can kind of optimize their product offering or their service offering as a result of that. The key one, obviously, you can optimize marketing campaigns. So you can make quick adjustments, you can improve the performance. Analytics and CRMs can add additional layers to that. So I always like to, obviously, all the ad platforms give you a lot of these metrics. I personally think analytics or a CRM layered on top of that can give you a lot more insight and provide you a lot more to kind of optimize. It's one of the areas that a lot of paid marketers aren't keen to get involved in. They tend to stay in the platform rather than going into an analytics and kind of using that additional data. And again, it allows for much better optimization of channels, because the amount of kind of user behavior stuff, especially within the platforms, is relatively limited compared to what you would see in analytics or a CRM package. You can enhance user experience. So it gives you insights to how people navigate the site, where they encounter issues. You can improve your site design, functionality. And it's actually often a lot more reliable than asking for user feedback or user testing, because people they don't know they're being monitored. So their behavior is a lot more natural than if you've asked them to complete a certain task and are recording them doing it, for example. The final two, the next last one is, so it allows you to diagnose site issues. We do this, like analytics is absolutely gold for kind of figuring out if there's particular issues with your SEO strategy, for example. So what we would tend to look at is performance by section, or it could be product area, kind of bundling things and segmenting the analytics. And what we're trying to do is diagnose whether there's an issue with the site. Is it at a page level, is it at a section level, or is it an entire site level? And that can often give you a really strong indicator as to kind of why you're seeing a decrease in traffic or a decrease in conversions, or wherever it may be. You can take that data as a starting point, and it's a really strong starting point, and then you work that backwards into things like, have we dropped impressions? Have we dropped rankings? Are fewer people clicking through? Is the conversion rate down? You can start to kind of diagnose what the issues are based on analytics. And the final one, the obvious one, is essentially using analytics. The main benefit is everything you have is data backed in your decision making. That's not to say that there isn't kind of a need for interpretation, market knowledge, user knowledge, that kind of thing, but it does give you that data to fall back on and justify decisions and to make plans, and to kind of really, it can be really useful to get buy-in from people as well. So that's the benefits of analytics. Dan, you're about to run another poll for me.
I am, yep. So we have another poll to talk about conversion to sale. So I'm just going to launch that for you. This should pop up onto your screen. No? Okay, thank you very much. So essentially, are you able to track website conversions through to sale? This is really important. As Matt sort of indicated, we don't tend to see many people take it from analytics and then populate into a CRM and have that come together. I think it's one of the biggest blind spots that businesses have, and something that we're constantly trying to discuss with them to say, okay, we've done this activity, how's that led through to a CRM, how's that led to leads? So it's really key. And I'm going to end the poll right now. And basically 70% are saying that they're unable to track website conversions through to a sale. So I think that's a really telling stat there, Matt. I don't know what your thoughts are.
It's probably the least surprising answer that I've heard. Essentially, it's very much dependent on the type of the site, and we're going to come to that in a second. Obviously, things like if you run e-commerce or there's an immediate sale that you can do on the site, those would probably, I would imagine, be the 25% of people who answered yes. The other 75% of people are probably the people who have a much longer lead time. They might be kind of, the website will get you to the demo stage or the inquiry stage, and then it kind of disappears into a black hole. At that point, the lead, it might then get passed to a sales team that you're not getting the information back from them, and it really gets lost. This is where things like HubSpot are kind of really, really valuable. I use HubSpot because it's kind of one of the most common ones, but it certainly is something where you could kind of pass HubSpot tracking IDs between analytics and HubSpot, and you can track it all the way through to a sale at the end of the day and revenue, which is kind of really important to get the most out of your marketing campaigns. So a couple of notes before I jump into the next bit. The first thing is essentially most people know what they should be doing. They just need to be told to do it, or to be encouraged to do it. So I would imagine there's a certain proportion of people sat on this call right now who kind of sit there and go, oh, you know, this is really kind of, I kind of knew this stuff, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that we always know, but we don't necessarily do. So hopefully even for those people, this will give you that kind of motivation to take those steps. The second note is there is no one size fits all approach to kind of analytics. The factors that determine how and what to track kind of determine what you need. We've kind of obviously had to pitch this in kind of the middle ground, and based on looking at people's sites who are kind of attending the webinar, this should fit most of you. So the next bit is the kind of the common factors to determine kind of what and how you should be tracking. There are, if I quickly count up, 8 of those. So the first one is the business or site type. Obviously, like what you should be tracking will be very different if you're kind of a magazine site, for example, compared to a commercial site that's trying to drive leads. Essentially, the tracking and the metrics that you care about will be completely different. The common mistake that we see a lot of people use, or a lot of people do, are they will use the same metrics regardless of whether they're appropriate to that site, that campaign. The next step is the business stage. So this again will determine what you should be tracking and how you should be tracking it. People in the growth stage will probably care a lot more about the kind of the top of the funnel, the kind of the audience growth, the impressions, the rankings, the volume, essentially the brand awareness that you're able to generate. People with a lot more mature sites and kind of a lot later in the business life cycle, essentially, they're going to be looking at how do I absolutely maximize every single piece of traffic that comes to my site, because maybe essentially they might be in markets where they have maximized the reach that they can get. So at that point, your metrics should be focusing much more around conversion and funnels and that kind of thing. The third one is the business need. Obviously, this is a big one. What you should track should always relate back into your business need, should always relate back into what your kind of to a certain extent, what the senior leadership care about within your business. Because if you can't prove that, what we found with a lot of people, if they can't prove kind of things to the senior leadership team, they fail to get the buy-in, they fail to kind of get the go-ahead for a lot of things they need to do. The next one is obviously the two broad areas that a lot of people are doing at the moment. They're either doing a demand gen approach or a funnel approach. This will again dictate what you should be tracking and how you should be tracking. For those of you who aren't aware of the difference between demand gen and funnel, essentially demand gen is more kind of focusing at driving the volume and driving the awareness right at the kind of the top, and then everything will filter down from there. Whereas obviously the funnel approach, you're doing top, middle and bottom of the funnel, and you're trying to kind of optimize and measure throughout, and you're trying to push people through a particular funnel. Whereas demand gen is a broader thing, and you're just trying to generate that awareness and that knowledge about your product or service at the top end. So that will obviously mean that you need to track significantly different things. Also the type of lead. So this will determine how effectively you're going to be able to do it. As I mentioned earlier, people who have a sale that goes directly through their site will be able to kind of track a lot better than those who are kind of then have to go, there's an offline section to their sales process. So what the type of lead is will determine how you should track and what you should track. The lead time for conversion as well. So obviously a lot of analytics has a default window for what it will report on. If your lead times and your lead through to conversion tends to take, let's say 6 months to a year, which it does for a lot of people, then analytics will struggle to track that back because the kind of the time frame and the time window by default will have finished. So you need to make amendments for that. A really key one that often people forget is I'm a very big advocate of there's no point in tracking something if you can't then take an action on it. It's kind of a bit pointless. It's a nice to know, but realistically, if you're not then going to do anything about it, why are you bothering to track it? And the final one is your ability to track. So there is just some cases where you do not have the ability to track things. So people might have legacy CRMs, which will just not work with analytics. You can't link up the two, you can't pass data between the two. So that is very much going to determine what you should be tracking and how. And it's one that we see quite often, things like universities, for example, they have a kind of a website that sits over here. We've got a CRM that sits over here, and trying to match up people who have applied through UCAS versus kind of people who've kind of downloaded a brochure or come to an open day is incredibly difficult unless you have like a really good CRM implementation. And most universities kind of web analytics is kind of playing catch up. So they might have had a CRM for a decade or something, and kind of linking that into GA4, which has just changed, can be problematic. So I'm going to move on to what you can track. I'm going to be focusing mainly around organic traffic and paid advertising and kind of website traffic and that kind of stuff, because that's where we specialize. There's obviously additional metrics and additional ways that you can track for things like email, organic social, all of those things. But it's kind of, we're just sticking where I think what most people are looking for at this point. And so we kind of view it as kind of a 5-stage approach. So there's reach, demand, engagement, conversion, and sale. And that's kind of the process of people moving through kind of becoming aware of you through to purchasing. And then there's an additional area as well for additional things that you can track by virtue of tracking some of the other things, or it might be the software that you can use to track one thing allows you to do others. So at the very top level, the first thing, reach, you have the ability to track, whether you should, we'll come to later. Things like your overall visibility, you can break that down to kind of brand and non-brand things. So similarly with impressions, whether you have brand or non-brand, say tools like SEMrush, Ahrefs will allow you to see kind of a huge snapshot of the keywords that you're ranking for. So you can see, are you trending? Are you trending up, and are you kind of getting more visibility overall regardless of ranking? You can look at keyword rankings, and if you're using ad channels, you can also see your overall reach. So your reach is slightly different to impressions on ad channels. So reach is how many people see it, and they might have multiple impressions. At the demand level, so you can look at things like click-through rate, traffic, link clicks, those sorts of things. At the engagement level, this is the biggest list. So there's lots of things you can measure for engagement. You can do kind of the micro conversions or events. You can look at those conversion rates. You can set event revenues as well. You can look at the really common things that a lot of people will look at, which is pages per session, average engagement time per session, sessions per user. All of those things show, are people finding the information on your website useful, coming back, spending time exploring it, the proportion of new users or new sessions, how many people add stuff to cart, how many people use comparison tables, chat usage other than kind of direct buying things. So a lot of people will have chat on their websites. And again, depending on what sort of chat you're using, it can be difficult to track that. And it certainly can be difficult to differentiate between what, like somebody using it and what they're using it for. So a lot of chat has it serves a dual purpose between kind of existing user query answering, new user kind of here's some basic questions I have, and then kind of that conversion and that trying to drive through to a sale. And the other one that you can do is scroll depth. So you can actually see not people going to the page, how long they're viewing a page. It's kind of how far they're scrolling down as well. And one I didn't put on here, which I should have done, is again video engagements as well. So how many people are viewing a video, that kind of thing. At the conversion stage, you can look at kind of your sales qualified leads, so how many people are calls, emails, demo books, meeting books, checkouts, signups, chat usage, conversion rates for all of those things as well. So at this stage, your chat usage should focus on how many people are taking a kind of a buying action via chat. And the final one, which again is probably for a lot of people the most difficult, is kind of looking at revenue, average order values, lead times, and conversion rates for sale. By virtue of tracking most of these things, you should also be able to track things like link volumes, either kind of if you're doing deep digital PR, you can how many links that kind of thing is generating for you. You can also compare to competition as well, and that's by virtue of using something like SEMrush to have a look at your visibility. You can have a look at indexation in Google Search Console as well. Within the ad platforms, things like quality scores, impression share, cost per click, those kind of things are additional things that you can track, which don't necessarily fall into these 5 buckets at the top. So actually what you should track, we've gone through what you can, what you should, very much depends on your campaign goals. So this is a kind of a excuse me, a broad look. So depending from your organic, whether you're looking at visibility and awareness, traffic, engagement, conversions, or sales, is what's your primary goal for your website? And then we've kind of I've listed them all out here as all of the things that you could track. Realistically, for most people, you should be kind of using the entire kind of cycle here rather than just looking at individual ones. But B, there's only some of these things that you should be tracking. So visibility and awareness, you should be looking at brand versus non-brand kind of impressions, visibility, that kind of thing. From a traffic point of view, it'd be user sessions and the percentage new of those. Engagement, I'll be honest, I only tend to use micro conversions, whether that's kind of downloading white papers, clicking on a specific call to action, doing a particular comparison, those kind of things, as opposed to things like bounce rate, engagement times, pages per session. There's a lot of reasons why they can bounce around wildly. There's a lot of reasons where it's hard to determine what is a good bounce rate. For example, there is no good. That what is good is dependent on so many different factors, like the style of content, the style of website that you're running, what you're actually looking for someone to achieve, and those kind of things. And then conversions, we would definitely be looking at kind of most of the time in there, and all 4 of those measures. From a paid ad point of view, this is very similar. So depending on what you're looking to achieve from your campaigns, you should be measuring different things. So if it's a kind of, you just want to drive traffic, you should be kind of looking at these. If it's a lead generation campaign, these are the kind of 4 measures that would be a priority. If it's e-commerce, these are the 4 measures. And if it's awareness, it's these 4 measures here. But again, for most people, most campaigns, unless you are doing the kind of like you're in a growth stage of a really new company where you're looking to drive your awareness and your traffic, most people are probably going to be in these 2 areas here. And again, I probably wouldn't look at just the single number of conversions. It would more be the quality or the value of those conversions, the cost per acquisition, the conversion rate. All of these are available through Google Analytics or the individual ad platforms. And then from an e-commerce point of view, average order value, cost per acquisition, ROAS, cost per click, and conversion rate. So interestingly, what a lot of people don't realize for things like paid advertising is there are only 3 metrics which actually determine kind of the effectiveness of your paid advertising. That's your cost per click, your conversion rate, and your average order value. If you optimize those 3 metrics, for example, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent at this point, but if you optimize those 3 metrics, they are the things where you drive your success. So a lot of the other things like kind of impressions, time on site, whatever it may be, aren't things that you can optimize for, and not things that you should be optimizing for paid campaigns. And then I've got an example of a typical tracking for a B2B lead gen client that we might do. The first bit, I'm going to show you kind of the technology that we would use. So from a reach point of view, we would be looking at using Google Search Console, something like SEMrush. And this one you're probably less familiar with, it's Agency Analytics. So we use Agency Analytics for our rank tracking. I'll come to what we would track with all of these in a second. At the demand level, we'll be using Google Analytics and hopefully some kind of cookie software as well. So, for example, Cookiebot, which would be our ideal kind of cookie implementation. The reason why we like that is you can actually see graphs for how many people opt in versus opt out. So it gives you that kind of understanding of what proportion of my traffic am I actually seeing within my analytics, because there's a whole kind of black hole there, which a lot of people don't know. We've had clients who've done things like turn their cookie implementation off just for a month or like a month just to see kind of what proportion of traffic they're actually normally getting. And for some clients, it can be down as low as kind of they're only getting 50% of the traffic that they're actually getting is being reported in their Google Analytics. At the engagement stage, we would use things like Google Analytics again, and things called just to view how people actually use the site. So there's Hotjar, or the other alternative to that is Lucky Orange. They both have enable you to actually see screen recordings of people going through the site. You can kind of watch back, you can see where they click, you can get heat maps, but you can literally watch a video. It's good to add the detail and to kind of dig a bit deeper, but primarily we look at Google Analytics. Conversion, we would use ideally Google Analytics, some kind of CRM. HubSpot ideally is the one that we tend to use, and then Infinity call tracking as well. So a lot of businesses, you'd be amazed how many businesses, in fact, if you ask them where do they get most of their leads, they will say people call us up, and then you say, right, how do you track that? And they're like, we don't. So something like, if that is your main lead driver, using something like Infinity call tracking to kind of give you that data about what someone viewed on the site before they gave you a call, being able to track them and kind of see that sale and to combine that data with your analytics. For me, it's a no-brainer. It's worth the investment. Yes, there's a cost to it, but it will more than pay back that cost in the long run, even the short run, to be perfectly honest. And then at the sales stage, again, Google Analytics, if you can, or HubSpot, or linking the two together. Basically, try and link your analytics to your CRM. From a dashboard point of view, we tend to use Agency Analytics. We also use Supermetrics, which is another tool. You can basically, why we use those, one of those two things is you combine all of the different data sources into one place. So they give you the ability to, a bit like Looker Studio, but significantly more reliable and more effective than Looker Studio. You can pull all of those data sources into one place and you just have one reporting dashboard. And the other things that obviously where we're pulling data from is Facebook, Google Ads and LinkedIn Ads. Obviously, depending, you can add more ad channels into that. From a B2B lead gen, that tend to be the ones that we use. So this is in a sense our tech stack. So you can see primarily we would be using Google Analytics as our kind of primary source of truth. A lot of the kind of, you'll see if you use kind of HubSpot versus Analytics, they'll give you, the data might look slightly different, and it's because they measure in slightly different ways. They get slightly different data through. So we always like to just pick one as our source of truth, essentially. And if we're going to optimize something, it will be analytics, via analytics. Similarly, Facebook love to claim every conversion they possibly can. Whereas if you compare that to the kind of Google Analytics conversion data, we would kind of look at the Google Analytics stuff because it's a fairer comparison between other channels. And even things like Google Ads, rather than using conversion tracking within Google Ads, we would link it to our Google Analytics and pass that data through. So we're not having competing kind of conversion data passed in. And what we actually track within those, so this is for the vast majority of people, this would be the absolute maximum you should be tracking from a metric point of view. You don't need to do all of these. We would generally do overall keyword visibility, non-brand versus, non-brand impressions. You can compare it to brand impressions if you think there's an issue there. So it's, again, it's quite telling sometimes where if you actually look, your non-brand clicks and impressions can be going through the roof, but actually your brand stuff is going down, and the offset is kind of not. The decline in brand is either eating the gains you're making or surpassing those gains. And the other one is campaign keyword rankings. So we might be tracking 10, 15, 20 keywords that we're actively targeting, as well as the keyword visibility overall. At the demand stage, what we would track is users, new users, sessions, and new sessions. So they're slightly different, obviously. One single user can have multiple sessions. GA4, I think, is really pushing the user. Universal used to push sessions, so it's a bit of a difference there, but pick one or the other or track both. At the engagement level, we'd just be looking at conversion rates and actuals for things like downloads, webinar signups, use of chat, other than for buying or support, emails and email signups. At the conversion stage, again, conversion rates and actuals, demos, meetings, booked, calls, use of chat with a buying intent and completing a checkout. And then completing a checkout, obviously, if you can, like for some sites, you can select the number of users and you sign up online. And then sale conversion rate through the funnel. So for a lot of clients, we help them build out the funnel beyond just their website. So it might be how many people are we kind of getting from call number 2 to call number 1 to call number 2, how many people are we sending a proposal or putting pricing together for, how many people are we closing, and then looking at those conversions going back. Similarly, it might be you might have a multi-stage sign up, so someone might sign up initially, then do an application, and then you kind of have acceptance rates for those applications as well. So you can kind of look at those conversion rates through and measuring all of those. And again, we would do that as well. And you'll also be looking at kind of average order value and the frequency of the sale as well. So is it a monthly recurring? Is it a one-off? Is it a 12-month? Whatever that may be. So again, you need to track that. From a dashboard point of view, there is no metrics. It's just where you combine them. And then the ad accounts, again, where the only additional data we'd probably pull through are spend, clicks, cost per click, and the conversion rate. But again, we would primarily want to use the Google Analytics one anyway. So that's realistically, if you were measuring all of those things, that would be the most that I think anybody on this call would have to measure. This would probably give you more than you actually need. Again, relate it back to what you actually need to achieve and what your business goal is and those kind of things. And Dan is going to run our third and final poll at this point.
Cheers, Matthew. I mean, there's lots of great insight there, and like just going through that is really important. And obviously, you've highlighted a number of tools there in terms of like Google Analytics and SEMrush and Arrange. And then the majority of those tools either are free or have a free version. But what I'm interested now to ask the attendees is, I mean, what additional tools, if any, are you using? So I've opened the poll. What additional reporting tools that you're paying for? It'd be really interesting to know, are you using any? How many? Things like that. So on the exit survey, there is a question that if you have said yes, it'd be great to understand what those were, because I feel like the free ones do a really good job, but there are some things like attribution, and you've talked a lot around connecting analytics to CRM, and that's something that we're doing for ourselves and how that works. And it can be a bit of a challenge to get that to work. So it's intriguing to see what people are doing. I'm going to leave this poll open for another 10 seconds. Matt, how do you think people have voted? Do you think they've mainly kept it at no, yes? What do you think?
Again, I'm going to go no. I think from experience, it's easier to get sign off internally for a budget for something where there's a direct revenue you get back from it. A lot of people might see kind of additional reporting tools as there is no kind of direct revenue. You can't say, oh, you know, I don't know, Infinity Call Tracking has made me £500, because you potentially would have made that money anyway, but it's your ability and your ability to optimize to generate additional money, I think is how you kind of get the sale through. And it's yeah, it's one of those things. People are often reluctant to spend what potentially in some cases can be a limited marketing budget on tools for measurement, but it is really worth it. And as you said, there's a huge number of free tools out there, and even things like connecting tools. You can use things like Zapier to connect different tools, and or there's Zapier equivalents. That there's probably cheaper ones for those too.
Excellent, thank you. So 38% of people have said that they do pay for additional reporting tools. So I'm intrigued to see how those come back at the end. So thank you very much, and back to you, Matt.
Perfect. So next one is talking tools, how you should be tracking. I'm not going to go through this because I've gone through it in quite a lot of detail as we've been going. I'm just going to give you some examples here. So for at the reach stage, Search Console, ad platforms, SEMrush, Ahrefs, Google Trends you can use. It's slightly more difficult. If you've got a brand that is well enough known to be able to do Google Trends and see that brand as a topic you can track, you can do it that way. And AWR is one that I haven't mentioned. It's if you want to do rank tracking at volume, it's probably the cheapest one that I found. It's Advanced Web Ranking. It's certainly cheaper than a lot of the competitors. At the demand stage, again, GA4, ad platform, Search Console, SEMrush, Ahrefs. But you can also use cookie software. So as I said, things like Cookiebot, $8, or it was $8 a month. I don't know how much I'm currently paying, but you can definitely see kind of the difference between opt-in and opt-out, which a lot of kind of bespoke implementations of cookie policy do not give you. You can also do kind of CRM and HubSpot at this stage. So a lot of people might use HubSpot as their single source of truth because that does do all of the channels. The reporting is slightly different to analytics, obviously. You can also look at your hosting as well. So kind of you can look at web requests and that kind of thing, which would give you, I think, again, it's a way to see how many people are actually going to your site. It's not, you don't get the depth, you don't get the kind of nice user interface, but it can give you a really strong indicator of what is the true number of people going to my site. At the engagement stage, GA4, again, ad platforms, but things like Lucky Orange and Hotjar, which are the things that let you see kind of screen recordings, chatbot software as well. A lot of these are terrible at linking through to Google Analytics, but it can be done. They might give you the information internally, but it can be a challenge sometimes just to get that information about, have they clicked on I need support, or have they clicked on I would like to buy something. And then the final one, again, is using a CRM. For the conversion stage, again, you can see most of the same ones here. Call tracking, again, use something like Infinity. If you're doing Google Ads, you can actually do click to call tracking on there, and I think Google call tracking as well. Calendly, again, you can do a free version of that, links through to analytics. You can break that down to how many people kind of start the process, pick a time date, and how many people submit the form. Again, completely free. You can literally ask people if you want to do the old school thing. I don't think it's great and it's not particularly reliable, but you can do it. And you can use landing page software as well at the conversion stage. And then a lot of them, in fact, they're all similar there, so I won't go through those. From a dashboard point of view, if you want free, Looker Studio. It's, in my opinion, not particularly user-friendly, and there's issues around kind of API limits with Google Analytics. But if you don't want to pay for something, Looker Studio, if you set up a dashboard, it can be really useful. As I said, we use agency analytics. We think it's a really good way. It's basically what Looker Studio should be if Google put some product development into it. And the final one is Supermetrics, which allows you to do add-ons for Google Sheets or things like Microsoft Excel. You can pull kind of data via APIs into your Google Sheets or your Excel. So again, that's a really great place. It works with SEMrush, Analytics, all of the ad platforms. It's not cheap though, but it can save you a significant amount of time if you find yourself regularly sat in Analytics going export, copy, paste into something else. Supermetrics is your friend. And if you want some competitive analysis, SEMrush and Ahrefs, I'll be honest, we favor SEMrush. It's the pricing is a lot better than the Ahrefs version, and it gives you, there's all sorts of additional things it does, but it's probably one of the easiest way to do competitive analysis. You need to take everything with a pinch of salt because it's all done on estimates. But for a particular keyword set, it can show you what you're ranking for compared to competitors. And finally, excuse me, we have the 21 common mistakes for analytics. I will go through these at pace so we do have time for questions at the end. So first one is not measuring anything. Again, you'd be amazed how many relatively large businesses are doing this. They don't really measure, they either measure nothing or not the right things. which is the next one. So there is no point in measuring metrics just because they look good and just because they're a vanity metric. It's kind of an agency cliche where each month you're looking for which random metric can I pull that makes us look good. Whereas in reality, you just want the same metric every month and make sure it's the right one that has a business impact. You're measuring too much. That's another common issue. Everybody wants to know everything. If you find your reporting is essentially recreating Google Analytics, you're doing it wrong. Effectively, you need to be focusing on a small handful of key metrics which are going to impact your business. Next one, kind of linked to the previous one, analysis paralysis. Again, a lot of the time we see a lot of people poring over data for kind of weeks and weeks and weeks, rather than kind of getting to a point where they're comfortable that the data is showing them enough to make a decision. So don't let your data analysis get in the way of actually taking actions. Not relating to business goals. Obviously, I mentioned this a couple of times. Anything that you measure needs to relate to a business goal. Again, it's all well and good people kind of saying, yes, our impressions are up or our visibility is up or we're ranking really well for this keyword. But if all your boss cares about is the revenue or the number of sales, you're just doing those other measurements to make yourself feel better, essentially. Not checking your data accuracy. Obviously, this is a big thing since cookie policies came in. Things like passing data from Facebook to Google Analytics, all of these things. Quite often we'll see people double tracking conversions, or we'll go in and go, oh, do you know this entire section isn't being tracked on your site? So make sure your data is accurate. You're not assigning values. So if you don't know the actual value of a conversion, but you can use theoretical ones, which can be really beneficial. Again, just kind of, if you can't have a guess of what a theoretical conversion value would be, just check, you can do somebody booking a demo is worth 100, somebody signing up for an email is worth 10. You're not spending money to do it right. Again, if your business is reliant on phone calls, if you're not tracking phone calls using a piece of software that allows you to do that, I think it's a false economy, effectively. You're not segmenting your data. So it's a real easy, if you're looking, again, if you're going into analytics and just looking at every single page on there, kind of like the performance every single page, that can hide a lot of issues. If you segment it into sections, landing pages, whatever it may be, it can really help you identify issues. You're ignoring the impact of cookie policies. Again, this is a really common one. People are forgetting that they're kind of losing maybe 40, 50% of the actual traffic they're getting to the site, and that traffic's still coming, they're just not getting it reported. You're doing unfair or incompatible comparisons. So again, I've mentioned it a couple of times. Things like HubSpot might call a session or might track a session is a different thing to what GA4 calls it. And so trying to compare the two and trying to marry those up can be impossible. And if you're comparing kind of apples and oranges, it's never going to work well. You're not connecting your CRM. I'm not going to go through that one. You're ignoring attribution. So the other common mistake people make is they forget that most analytics is last click attribution modeling. And I think annoyingly, Google Analytics might be getting rid of their attribution modeling as well, but you need to bear in mind that a channel may not look like it's driving conversions, but if you turn that channel off, it can essentially kill your conversions because they needed that channel to find you in the first place, or they need that channel to see the benefit before they make a conversion. You're ignoring the context in the analysis. So you might look, if you look month by month, for example, you might see there's a 50% drop, but that might purely be seasonality. It might be Easter. If you're in B2B and you wonder why your traffic is down in March or April, I can guarantee you it's going to be Easter because a lot of people are on holiday. So a lot of people forget that. Also, Easter really annoyingly moves. So in some years it can be March, some years it can be April. So even a year-on-year comparison might hide that. You're missing the context of those increases or drops. You're not mapping your journey. So another one is kind of, if you don't understand where you're trying to push people through a funnel, if that's the approach you're taking, you haven't mapped that, you haven't mapped the journey through your site, you're not trying to see, are we moving people from a landing page to a kind of a product page, or from a resource to another resource to a product page. You need to map your journey so you can see how effective that is, and that's linked into the segmentation as well up here. You're not removing existing users. They are great for inflating your website traffic and massaging your ego. But if people are coming back to your site to log in, you need to be removing that traffic as best you can. Otherwise, what you'll see is the more customers you have, the quicker your traffic will go up, but that compounds the other way as well. If you start losing customers, then your drops will be bigger than they otherwise should be. So it can be really misleading. And especially if you're looking at things like conversion rates, literally you might have the thing where 75% of your traffic is coming to log in. They're never going to buy anything new, but your conversion rates are massively out of whack. You're not understanding what the site is for. So a lot of websites aren't there to actually close a sale. They might be there to be a brochure to point people to. So if you don't understand what actually your website is designed to do, you might be measuring the wrong things. You're not using enough data for comparisons. Again, I've seen people where they'll look month versus month, or they might see kind of, this 10 days, the first 10 days of the month we're down. And it might be completely different days of the week. It's just not giving you enough data to be able to make to be statistically significant to make decisions from. You're doing infrequent analysis, so you might just dive into your analytics kind of every 3 months, or you might do it month by month and then leave it for 6 months or whatever that may be. You need a regular cadence of reporting. You're ignoring the quality, you're focusing on quantity. So again, this is another one where we quite often have conversations with people where they're like, yeah, great, our conversions are up 50%, but none of those people are in the right market. So how do we address getting those people within the right market? So if you're ignoring the quality of your leads, that's going to be problematic too. And the final one is not doing anything with the findings. If your report doesn't have a clear set of actions that come from the back of it, or if your analytics isn't providing you with actionable insights, then you're probably measuring the wrong things in the wrong way, the wrong frequency, whatever it may be. So always make sure that if you're saying our traffic is up, down, our conversions up, down, what is the action that you need to do as a result of that? And that is everything. Apologies for going slightly longer than the 45 minutes I was aiming for that bit, but we do still have a few minutes for Q&A if there are any.
Cool. Well, thanks very much, Matt. That was a huge amount of information to digest. So I'm definitely going to be going back through the recording afterwards. I'm just going to give a few seconds for people to finish adding in any questions that you want me to ask Matt. One from me, if you don't mind, is you talked about the brand and the non-brand impressions during the organic bit, and you talked about that. It's like, where can we find that information? What platform?
One of the easiest way is Google Search Console. You can apply filtering to it to do kind of brand and non-brand. The difficulty comes with brand and non-brand is getting the right filters in place. If you haven't tried regex, go and have a look at kind of how you write regex. It's a lot easier. It's not as scary as people make it out to be. So it's trying to find the simplest filter, which gets rid of most of your brand and non-brand traffic. Similarly, you can do it with tools like SEMrush. I think they have a measure within there anyway, but again, you can filter their ranking data and things by brand and non-brand. But it can be really eye-opening for a lot of people that you kind of always assume that your brand traffic just does this, and it doesn't by any stretch of the imaginations. It will be going up and down, especially if you have a more generic or a brand name that can mean more than one thing. So I'll be honest, we had a client that their brand was called Alfresco. So obviously things like that peak in the summer for alfresco dining and that kind of thing. And they were driving impressions and kind of randomly clicks from that, even though it was nothing relevant. But kind of, yeah, if you use Search Console, is probably it's the cheapest way and one of the easiest ways.
Cool, thank you very much. Another question that we had come in was, do you have a template that would help me track cost per lead per channel?
Yes, I think we have one from a previous webinar that I did. So I'll see if I can dig that out. It does return on investment and return on ad spend for paid channels. But yes, the kind of answer is yes. I will find one for you or point you in the right direction at the very least.
Well, thank you. We'll pick that up after the call. Another one from the questions was, without getting developers and things like that involved, because obviously with tracking and tools, there's an implementation element. What's the best way that we could possibly deploy analytics and analytic tools nowadays?
The good thing about GA4, actually, a lot of people hate on it, but the ability to generate conversions is conversion tracking is a lot easier because they change from basically they change to an event-based tracking model. So there's a lot of inbuilt conversions, a lot of inbuilt things that they track anyway, like external link clicks and that kind of stuff. So it's just a case of going into the admin section and selecting which ones you want to be conversions. You can also, if the ones that you want aren't coming up by default, you can create your own. The thing that we would usually recommend to people is use Google Tag Manager. It can look a bit scary. Again, this is where YouTube is your friend. There's a lot of really great tutorials about how to use it. But effectively, once you put the JavaScript code on, and you will need your developers to do that, you can implement every other piece of tracking via Tag Manager. You don't need to keep going back to your developers, and you have a lot more control over it yourself as well. And there's a lot of built-in tags as well. So, for example, Cookiebot. You just put your ID number into Tag Manager. Similarly with Google Analytics, it's all there's templates for you to use and it's all built in, so that does make it a lot simpler.
Well, thank you very much. Another couple of questions just to finish off. I'm conscious of our time. Was I use multiple data platforms and they have different metrics. Why is it why are they different?
I mean, why is one of those questions for the platforms, but realistically, essentially, if you look at the definitions, so if you take HubSpot and Google Analytics, for example, HubSpot, what they define a session or a user as, has a slightly different name, or is a slightly different metric to what GA4 has, for example. Similarly with, if you do Facebook advertising, a click in Facebook advertising is completely different to a click in Google Ads. On Facebook advertising, it might be someone's clicked on the image, someone's clicked to read more. Doesn't necessarily mean that they've clicked through to your website. And so it's essentially you're always measuring different things depending on whether you're in a Google environment or Facebook or whatever it may be. And similarly, even things like the volume of clicks that you see within Google Ads will probably be higher than the sessions you're seeing in Google Analytics 4, because it's the difference between the Google Ads are using their cookie policy, your website uses your cookie policy, essentially. So we would always suggest having a single source of truth. We tend to use Google Analytics, and whatever's in there we take as the primary data. It will not stop you being asked by anybody you report to, why is this number different? And it's just down to the definition. It's not usually down to an implementation issue.
Well, thank you. And I guess you sort of answered the next question, the final question a little bit as well, is even if you have multiple data platforms, would you use a single platform for your single source of truth?
Yeah, we tend to use analytics just because it's deployed for all of our clients. The other thing is, even if you're using multiple sources, still bring them into one place. So Looker Studio, make yourself a Google Sheet or Excel. Agency Analytics, I'm a big advocate of, because you can bring in different data sources all into one place. So at the very least, you can look at them side by side without having to click between different platforms and try and marry it up that way.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, well, we are coming to the end of the webinar. Thank you very much, Matt, for the presentation. It's great. Thank you very much for attending. And yeah, look out for the next webinar coming soon. Have a great day. Take care.